Right, I think we can start. Sorry, I'm a bit late. We can start now because we've got a quorum. So please invite the administration in.
有個 table 嘅 submission 順序係上次有人發言之後再俾，不過因為我哋開會前冇時間出去，今朝先收到，所以 table 嘅啫。明白。冇特別嘅意見嘅。
我意思有冇嘢要宣佈啊？
宣佈今次係因為仲有跟進翻上次嗰啲事項啦，所以先請政府去到解個文件先。
好喺呢度，首先係多謝環境保護。
So I would like to welcome from the EPD, Deputy Director Mr. Andrew La, Assistant Director Mr. Mok Wai Chun, and then PEPO Mr. Fong Kin Wah, and then from the DOJ we have Government Counsel Mr. Alex Lai. I understand that the administration has provided us with a response in relation to concerns expressed by the deputations. Mr. Lai, please. Yes, thank you. At a public hearing, deputations expressed some concerns. We provided members with our written response last Friday. I'll now highlight the salient points. We understand that members are concerned about the impact of the test fee increase on vehicle owners. I hope that members will understand that this increase will not apply to all 700,000 vehicle owners in Hong Kong. The test fee increase will only affect vehicle owners who have not been maintaining their vehicles properly and whose vehicles have caused excessive emission. For these vehicle owners, they have to have their vehicles tested at the DVETCs, and they have to pay the fees. So for the majority of the vehicle owners in Hong Kong, they will not be affected by the increase. We launched the remote sensing scheme in 2014, and in fact the purpose is to bring about improvements to roadside air quality. We launched the remote sensing scheme in September 2014, and as at the end of April this year, we detected the emissions from about 400,000 vehicles, and only about 3,100 vehicles have been found to have caused excessive emissions. So we can see that, in fact, for the majority of the vehicle owners, they will not need to pay the test fees. They will not be affected by the test fee increase. Only a minority of vehicle owners will be affected by the increase. And this test fee is not a fine. In fact, the test fee is paid for the service of the DVETCs. There are 4, and I understand that no one likes any fee increase, but then the fees have not been increased by for 17 years. And so we are proposing this increase so that the DVETCs can recover their operating costs. In fact, the 4 DVETCs have written to members. They've told members that they are operating under great difficulty. And they hope that the test fees can be increased to a reasonable level. And so this proposed test fee increase is important for the viability of the DVETCs. And then emission test arrangements. If the weather permits, we place 3 sets of remote sensors in the territory, and we usually choose flat roads and also lower ends of steep roads. This is in line with international practice for the deployment of remote sensors. And then concerning replacement of catalytic converters, the scheme was completed early last year. About 80% of the taxi and PLBs took part in the scheme. I understand that some are concerned about the effectiveness of remote sensors, and some are worried about the performance of the catalytic converters. There were a handful of owners who complained, and we followed up with the relevant owners or car firms. And some have asked whether we welcome more LPG taxi brands. The answer is, of course, yes, so members need not be worried. At the moment, there are 3 LPG taxi brands available in Hong Kong. It's true that maybe one taxi brand has a dominant position in the market, but then we do welcome new taxi brands in Hong Kong. I mean LPG taxi brands. And then finally, some members have asked whether we can postpone the increase of the test fee. As I have said just now, the test fee has not been adjusted for 17 years. And the proposed increase seeks to enable DVETC operators to recover their operation costs. And as I have said just now, only owners of vehicles which have not been properly maintained will be affected by the test fee increase. And so we hope that members can approve the increase of the test fees from 1st August this year. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lai. Members, do you have any follow-up questions? Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Thank you, Chairman. Last time we heard the deputation's views. Of course, we welcome improvement in air quality. It is true that the fees have not been increased by 17 years, but then the fees will be increased by 2 times, and that's really too big an increase. So can the increase be divided into 2 phases or implemented in 2 phases? Yes, thank you. Chairman, I thank Mr. Poon for his question. As the proposed increases is a 100% increase, vehicle owners may find that rather unacceptable. But then I hope that members will understand that not all 700,000 vehicle owners in Hong Kong have to pay this test fee every year. Only those owners of vehicles which have caused excessive emissions will have to pay the test fees. So only a minority of vehicle owners in Hong Kong will be affected. From September last year till the end of April this year, we detected 400,000 vehicles, and we detected 3,100 vehicles with excessive emissions. 2% were taxis, 1% PLBs, and then 0.5% or less private cars. Now, wages have gone up, and also DVETCs have, upon the request of the EPD, used dynamometer based emission tests, and so costs have gone up. And so we hope that members will approve the increase from 1st August this year onwards. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Now these operators are doing a business, and with fewer and fewer vehicles found to have excessive emissions, these centers will have less business. In fact, many have said that the centers should be run by the government, but then the government has refused. And now you are proposing 100% fee increase for the test fees. You may say if owners maintain their vehicles properly, they will not have to pay the fees. But then still, I think this 100% increase is really excessive, especially when we're talking about 100% at one go. And now, of course, operators only have in mind their commercial considerations, and even with the increase, if there aren't too many vehicles going to the DVETCs, then the operators will still find their business not viable. Mr. Tankapil. I want the EPD to understand that the taxi trade and the LPG minibus trade are very discontented concerning the procurement of catalytic converters. In fact, there were many problems, but they've already installed the catalytic converters, but then you are again proposing an increase in test fees. So can the increase be phased, or can commercial vehicles be exempted from the increase? Now these centers, I understand, are self-financing. And I understand that if we want to change the mode of operation of the centers, that will be a big issue. But then can you consider my suggestions? Mr. Lai. As Mr. Poon and Mr. Tang have rightly pointed out, these centers are self-financing. And so operators have to do their own business calculations. In fact, we have stepped up enforcement action against diesel vehicles, and as a result, the number of smoky diesel vehicles has dropped. So when vehicle owners know that they must step up the maintenance of their vehicles, then it is most likely that the number of LPG vehicles to be tested at the DVETCs will also drop. So we as the EPD doesn't have the testing centers, we have to rely on these centers. We have to rely on market forces, and we don't want these testing centers to have to close down because we don't have our own testing centers, and because if these testing centers close down, the employees will lose their jobs. So it's the vehicle owner's responsibility to maintain their vehicles properly. But then if they fail to do so, and if their vehicles cause excessive emissions, then we will have to require that the vehicles be tested.
Allow me to chip in here. Now, if it is the administration's good intention that these vehicles will be better and better maintained, now you still have a few thousand vehicles caught to do the test. What if there are only a few hundreds left? How can these centers continue to be viable? Then the cost may not be, the fees may not be $600 but a few $1,000s. So if all the vehicle owners maintain their vehicles properly, sooner or later there will be no business for these centers. Yes, your observation might be possible if the day comes when we do not catch any smoky vehicles on the road, and if these DVTCs rely on such tests to remain viable, that may be a problem. But when the day comes, we will see how we can address the matter. But the urgent matter for them is to be able to survive now. So we must raise the fees to a reasonable level first. Already in the past year, you have caught 3,000 odd vehicles, and if these vehicles are well maintained in the future, the number may drop to 1,000. And these centers may tell you that we cannot cope. Fees must be increased further. Will this happen? We will keep an eye on the operation of these centers. But we believe that in the first few years, using our experience in catching smoky diesel vehicles, it would be at least 10 years before the number of vehicles caught will substantially reduce. Mr. Tankapiu, do you have any follow-up? The administration has not clearly addressed the dissatisfaction expressed by the industry at the last public hearing. We do understand the transport trade's possible extra expenses because of the new fees. We do understand that, but after balancing all factors, we believe that if owners are required to pay extra testing fees because they have not maintained their vehicles properly, then it is a proper way to do it compared with the law-abiding motor vehicles that have properly maintained their vehicles, and also the impact on people who suffered from poor air quality. But we're not, you and I are not paying. It is the industry that has foot the bill. Can you really reconsider a proposal? Well, this is the first fee increase after 17 years. Now, if we come back every couple of years for 100% increase, I understand that you will feel rather fed up because of the impact on the transport industry. But after all, this is the first increase after 17 years. Although it is 100% increase, in fact, the fees is just from $310 to $620. Mr. Gary Chen, I believe the director has noted the taxi industry's dissatisfaction with the fees. The views were very strong. I'm sure everyone here heard their very strong sentiments. I do agree that all vehicle owners, no matter whether they're driving a commercial vehicle or private vehicle, should maintain their vehicles well so as to minimize the impact on air pollution or air quality. But the increase is from 310 to 600 odd, and I think this is a very sharp increase. For commercial vehicle owners, they will lose a day of business when they take their vehicle to a test, and the fees will add to their burden. So may I ask the director to reconsider as regards the rate of increase and also the commencement date to make it more acceptable to the industry. The administration claims that the increase will be from 310 to 620 to recover cost. You know, the inflation rate is very high. Today it's 610. Perhaps the next year the inflation rate will be very high. Will you come back to us for another increase next year? If not, does that mean that this 620 testing fee has already factored in possible increases in the coming few years, to the extent that you don't have to apply for another fee revision in the coming few years? If that's the case, you see there is room for you to scale down your increases. This time you don't have to increase the fees by 100% at once. And at the last meeting, the transport trade talked about tests for emission. They said that every year they had to do that in their yearly vehicle examination. Why can't that be included in the transport department's examination, so that they don't have to do it again? And if all vehicles do their duty in maintaining their vehicles, and there will be fewer and fewer smoky vehicles in the future, and this sector may not be viable anymore. So the administration cannot just rely on the market. Of course, there are 3,000 odd here, but if we have more measures to improve the emission of vehicles, then maybe these centers cannot be viable anymore. Deputy Director. Yes, Mr. Chen is very correct. For annual vehicle examination of commercial vehicles and private vehicles that are over 6 years old, if the Transport Department can include this in their annual vehicle examination, so that the vehicle owners can understand the emission situation of their vehicles, this is an excellent idea. We do agree, and therefore we're asking the Transport Department to do about this. The examination center at Kowloon Bay is rather small. It cannot cope with a large volume of vehicles. It's already challenging enough for them now. And if they have to test dynamometer as well, they may not be able to cope. We have to wait until they have moved to Tsingyi, and we hope that in the long term they can have enough space to deal with tests of dynamometer as well. But this will not happen in the coming few years, and we're a bit eager to improve our roadside air quality for the benefit of public health. So we hope that all vehicle owners can be extra vigilant about the emission maintenance of their vehicles. And if they're caught, they will have to undergo the test. And our long-term goal is the same as Mr. Gary Chan's. As regards the fees levels, they are fixed with reference to the current operation of these DTVCs. We have not factored in the projected inflation of the future years into the fees. But in fact, these DVTCs and ourselves are very pragmatic. If we see the very grave concern expressed by members, then it is unlikely for us to come back next year or in the near future to consider another fees increase. We are pragmatic. We do understand the situation. But of course, I won't guarantee to members that there will be no more fees increases in the future. From time to time, we will review whether the fee levels are reasonable, so that we don't have to effect 100% increase after 17 years like this time. Maybe at least every 2 to 3 years we will review whether the levels are appropriate, and we will only come back to members where there is an absolute need. If they are commercially viable, we are inclined not to come back for another fees increases. So you're saying that the operating costs for this year and the next will be the same? This is rather impossible. I believe next year the operating costs are bound to be higher. Have you taken into the possible increases in operating costs in the coming few years? For instance, for wages, it is impossible for wages not to be increased in the coming 2 years unless we have a deflation. Yes, point taken. Mr. Gary Chan's comments are very valid. Things are very expensive in Hong Kong now. And it is unnatural for the operating costs of these centers to increase in the long term. But anyway, what we are addressing now is a very imminent operating difficulty of the DVTC. The current fees will not make them viable anymore, so we urge members to support the proposals. The DVTCs do understand that the operating costs will increase year on year, but they have no intention or no expectation to come back and ask for a fee increase on an annual basis. They understand that this is not really the way to do it. But to address the current operating difficulties, I think the proposed increases are really needed and urgently needed. I also have further questions to ask in relation to the responses by the administration. D, emission test arrangements. I asked last time the location of the tests. Last time you told us that it would not be at the beginning of uphill upslope road. Now this is different from what you told us just now. I don't know whether this is international standard, because at the beginning of a steep road, you will certainly press the gear, and if the location is just at the beginning of a steep road, then I am of an uphill road, then I am a bit doubtful. You paid for the replacement of catalytic converters for 17,000 taxis and minibuses. I know the warranty period is 12 months. And you assumed that if the vehicle owners could maintain the device properly, what would be the expected service life of the converters? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And for replacement of catalytic converters, you told us that you received complaints from about 230 vehicle owners. And how many vehicles are we talking about? Because some owners may own more than one taxi. So can you tell us the exact number of vehicles involved? You told us 1%. Unless we'll talk about one vehicle per owner, otherwise this may not be the real picture. And you told us there are already 3 mix. In fact, 2 LPG, 2 types of LPG, and 1 is mixed fuel vehicles. We asked, why don't you open up the scheme to diesel vehicles, because diesel vehicles are already up to Euro standards. You told us that the nitrogen oxides emitted by LPG vehicles are better, but in Europe they allow Euro vehicles to be used. Is it true that the standards cannot be below that, because even internationally the Euro standards are accepted?
And some people are complaining about very limited choice. So at the moment, if people want to bring in more luxury type taxis, they can't do so. And you're saying that for taxis, the mileage is great, but in fact, even for some company vehicles, the mileage is also very great. And then you said that only 1,862 taxis were caught by the remote sensors, but there are only about 18,000 taxis in Hong Kong, so in fact it's 10% already. Members have said that the increase should be postponed, and you are saying that in fact vehicle owners who maintain their vehicles properly will not be affected by the increase. But last week the taxi trade said that many of the problems were caused by the catalytic converters. And so the taxi trade wants the increase to be shelved. And then in fact I have in fact suggested that for the testing centers they should be housed in government premises. You do not agree, but then I think vehicle inspection is regulatory work. You at the moment you are contracting out the service, but then in my view in fact ultimately the centers should be operated by the government. Now we have about 3,000 vehicles which have to go to the testing centers every year, but maybe in future we may only have 300 vehicles a year, and as a result these operators will have to ask for further testing fee increases. When you introduce new policies, it seems that you do not liaise with other departments. For example, the transport department's equipment is backward. We don't know when its center will be equipped with the dynamometers. As Mr. Gary Chan has said, these taxi owners have to pay for the test fees, and then they will also lose one day's income, and that would amount to over $1,000. So, and also you imagine what's going to happen if a public transport operator comes to LegCo and tells LegCo members that the fares have not been raised by many years, and so 100% increase in the fare is proposed. I'm sure that will not be passed, even when we are only talking about $1 or so in absolute money terms. So I understand that the operators do face difficulty in their operation. In fact, I have considered the idea of moving an amendment to postpone the fee increase, but then several members have suggested that the fee increase be phased. So I think that's an idea which is acceptable to different parties. So will you consider this suggestion? If not, then I will again consider moving an amendment to postpone the fee increase. Yes, Chairman. I think I'll answer some of the questions, and then my colleague will talk about diesel taxis and also where the remote sensors are placed. Yes, we had a subsidy scheme for owners of taxis and PLBs to replace the catalytic converters. In fact, we said right at the outset that catalytic converters had to be replaced on a regular basis. And at that time we said that that would depend on the mileage and also the utilization situation. At that time we said that the catalytic converter would have to be replaced once every 1 to 2 years. So in other words, these taxi owners will have to replace their catalytic converters very soon. So even though we provided the subsidy, it didn't mean that they would not have to replace their catalytic converters again. And then I want to say that we're in fact talking about only 200 odd vehicles for the complaints. I understand that members are concerned about the extent of fee increase, whether the increase is excessive, whether we can have the increase implemented in phases. And I can understand why members have made such suggestions. But then we can see that these DVETCs are operating under great difficulty. In fact, we used to have a maximum of 12 centers, but now we only have 4. The center operators knew that the government would put in an application for the increase in testing fee or the test fees, and as a result there were 1 to 2 more newcomers. And so if this increase is not approved, then the centers will continue to encounter great operational difficulties, and as a result we will also have difficulties effectively dealing with the smoky vehicle problem. And then my colleague Mr. Mock can supplement. Yes, Chairman. Concerning the deployment of the remote sensing equipment, now we'll make sure that the the locations where the engines are in a stable condition. Now can you give me a drawing that is drawn to scale on the locations of the sensors? Yes, Chairman. Chairman, concerning the catalytic converters. Now, according to the manufacturers, the catalytic converters should be replaced for every 100,000 km run. And for a taxi, that would mean about 10 months only. So even if a vehicle is well maintained, then the catalytic converter still needs to be replaced after a year or so or 2 years. But of course, the lifespan of the catalytic converters depends on how the vehicles are used and also the mileage. Now, if the catalytic converter breaks down, in fact there is no warranty, but then under the our subsidy scheme, a 12-month warranty period was provided. And then for people who replace their catalytic converters later, whether there will be any warranty will be a matter between the company and the vehicle owners. At the moment, there are 3 LPG taxi brands available in the market. It is true that one brand is particularly popular. And as for diesel taxis, I want to say that we are open-minded, but then I want to say that EU 6 standards for taxis are more relaxed than EU 6 standards for vehicles. And also, in Europe, their experience shows that with many diesel taxis running on the streets in the urban area, the level of NOx is rather high. For NOx and nitrogen dioxide on the roadside, yes, is it that we should allow diesel taxis? Now, we will not say that we will definitely ban diesel taxis. Maybe in future we may have diesel taxis which are extremely environmentally friendly. So we'll have to look at the development in technology. So for Euro 6 standards, are you telling us that there are different standards for petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles? Yes. Now for big vehicles like buses, the NOx problem is resolved because there is certain equipment. For private vehicles, I want to say that I need to point out that for diesel vehicles, the NOx emission is higher. You can see that in Europe, the Euro 6 standards for diesel vehicles are more relaxed than the emission standards or NOx standards for petrol vehicles. So is there only one standard? There is only a cap, but then for diesel vehicles, the standards are more relaxed. So in other words, there are 2 standards. Yes, but then there are only caps. This is because in Europe, they know that the emission reduction technology for diesel vehicles is not as good as the emission reduction technology for petrol vehicles. And then, so can you provide us with all the information? Because, Assistant Director, because I just want to know all the details. All right. Yes, Mr. Tankapu, Chairman. I think what few taxis will use in future is really outside the ambit of the work of the subcommittee. Now, I will not seek to change the mode of operation of DVETCs in the context of this piece of subsidiary legislation. And I will not suggest that parties other than vehicle owners should pay for the test fees. But then at the public hearing, the owners of commercial vehicles complained about the excessive increase. You shouldn't say that it's only a few percent of the total number of vehicles. You know, for your frontline colleagues, I'm sure they will target taxis and trucks more than private vehicles. So the taxis and the trucks and the PLBs are your main targets. So can we do something about the timetable for the implementation of the increase? Now, the chairman has said that he has considered moving an amendment. Can the department consider our suggestions, for example, having the increase implemented in phases?
Deputy Director, I think you have heard comments from members, including myself, that there should be some adjustments in the fees increases. Of course, the industry has asked me to refute your order, but I don't think that is very appropriate. So will you consider suggestions by members here to implement the increases in phases? Because whoever comes to us for fee or fares increases in this way, to this extent, will certainly object. And yet, this proposal has come from the administration. So you accept Mr. Pan's suggestion, and that is to implement the increases in phases. So can you please give us a reply now so that we can decide whether we should start doing our homework? I do appreciate members' concerns. I have to admit that we've explained to members why we have to effect the increases in one go, but it seems our justifications are not really accepted by members. However, I'm still pleased to see that members do understand that these DVETCs are commercial entities, and it is right for them to recover cost to sustain their operation. And although the rates of increases seem to be high, but members in general support it. It's just that some members would like us to effect the increases, for instance, by 2 phases. I think our differences are narrowing. And the only argument here is whether the fees should be increased in one go or in 2 phases. If our differences are so narrow now, then can members agree to our original plan? And what's the original plan? 100% increase for the commencement date to be the 1st of August. You mean only to effect half of the increase in the 1st of August. So what is your plan, Chairman? For instance, an increase by 50% this year first, and another 50% in 2 years' time. I think you say that our differences are narrowing is on the basis of the order here, but must the test be done by commercial entities? I think we can further discuss that. Now, the function of the subcommittee is not to discuss the mode of operation. It is our duty to listen to the views of the public and industry and decide whether we support you. Your original plan is to commence the new fees on the 1st of August. And from what we heard from the transport industry, they don't accept this. So it's also unacceptable to us. However, we cannot change our mode of operation. And if we do not change the fees at all, then these centers may not be able to cope anymore. So we have as a compromise, proposed something to you. So you should discuss first and come back to us. Now, if you do not change it, then maybe it's not good. It is best for if the change is to come from you. Yes, no one likes fee increases, but I appreciate members' concerns. If eventually we have no choice but to effect the increases in phases, and that is to effect the first phase on the 1st of August, can the next round of increase take place 1 year afterwards? Because by Mr. Chen, we face the problem of inflation and rising operating costs. If the DVETCs can recover costs earlier, I think it is a very important point for them. So can you allow the second phase to happen earlier? Before I invite other members to speak, now I've already consulted my industry on the two proposals I made. Why do I say 2 years? Because we are hoping that some breakthrough would happen in the interim. And secondly, I asked about the expected service life of these catalytic converters. It is about time for these converters to be replaced. Perhaps the industry would go and source another type of converter. Maybe they will go for an original model, and perhaps the performance will be better. So on behalf of the industry, I've proposed 2 years. I'd like to hear the views from other members. Mr. Pan? I think for a private operator, it will only continue its business if it is viable. And I think the most critical point, according to your paper, is the rental of these centers have to pay, and no one can predict the trend of rental in the future. And the industry are strongly against this sharp increase. Since the chairman represents the industry, I think he knows the wish of the industry better, and perhaps it will be conducive if you effect the increases by phases. We are not sure. Even after the fees increases, the commercial DVETCs can continue to operate. The EPD is the monitoring department. If there are no centers available in the market to test these vehicles, you have to take it up. So I think you should consider the administration's proposals. If you do not amend the order and the chairman does it, then as members, we have to go by the chairman's wish if he represents the industry, because no one can tell what will be the trend of rent increases. Perhaps there can be a fourfold increase. Well, you're asking for the administration is asking for it for the remaining fees to be increased in 1 year's time. Do you have other views? Well, my suggestion is to implement the increases in phases, 50%, and the timetable can be negotiated. So this is our consensus. How to make it acceptable to the industry and the community is the government's responsibility. So I think it is more practical for the administration to give us an answer. So Deputy Director, will you give us a reply today or later? Chairman, I understand that we have had 4 meetings to discuss this order. I understand that the views of the DVETCs and the industry are heard by all of us. And I'm pleased to see that members agree that the fees should be increased, and the extent of increase is also acceptable. The only remaining point is the timetable for implementation. So, Chairman, and I know you represent the industry, and they want the fees to be increased by 50% in August only, and for the remaining 50%, that should only be effected after 2 years. But that may create a very heavy operating burden on the industry. Now, if the chairman wants 2 years, and I said 1 year, can we change that to 1.5 years? Is it acceptable to to members here? If it is acceptable to the subcommittee, then will the amendment be made by the administration? Well, if I cannot convince members to accept our original proposal, then I will propose amendments according to the consensus of this subcommittee. Do we have to decide now, Chairman? Well, we've already held 3 meetings. Dr. K.K. Kwok, well, of course, I want the administration to withdraw its proposal, but we do understand the genuine difficulties of the DVETCs, so I think I can accept a compromise. So do we accept the government's proposal, 15% increase in August this year, and for the remaining 50% to be effected in 1.5 years' time? Now, if we accept this new proposal, then it is our responsibility to explain to stakeholders. But at least this proposal is more acceptable to the original one. Mr. Pan? I think I can accept it. At least it addressed the concerns of some members of the sector. I think it has addressed some of the concerns of the industry. So 1.5 years, Dr. Dr. Kwok, well, this is acceptable to me. So all members present here agree to the new proposal from the administration for the 50% fee increases to be effected this year, and the remaining 50% to be implemented in 1.5 years' time. Well, on the basis of this consensus, we'll discuss with the DOJ colleagues, and then we'll exchange views with the legal advisor of the council. But, except by the chairman, the extent of increase will remain the same. It's just that the first 50% will take effect on the 1st of August this year as scheduled. But for the remaining 50%, it will be implemented on the 1st of February 2017. Our amendments to the order will be on this basis. Anyway, it will be 18 months from the 1st of August. All right, I understand it is 18 months after the first increase. Secretariat, can we go to the order itself? Let's scrutinize the order. It is relatively simple. Chairman. The order itself is rather simple. Commencement date. We will submit an amendment according to the consensus made today. And Section 3 involves the fees and charges. After we will amend the order, and then we will have a new schedule of fees under B1, 2, 3, and then the amended order will have the exact fee to be effective on the 1st of August 2015, and also the fees that will be effective after 18 months, counting from August. All right. Members, do you have any comments? The order itself is relatively straightforward.
好咁就都請大家留意下咧，委員。
Just to remind members of the legislative timetable, expiry date 8th of July. We've already got a consensus today, and so we'll be giving a report to the House Committee. So members will not be moving CSAs, but if they wish to do so, they must do so by the 30th of June. All right, any other questions? No? AOB. I haven't got any AOB items. Do members have any AOB items? No? Then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.